Once there was a couple, James and his wife Sharon, who were on their way to see the musical Hamilton. They were running late, of course. The babysitter had arrived late, and an accident had caused unexpected traffic. By the time James and Sharon arrived at the theater, the first act had finished, and everyone was taking an intermission. Now, some people might have chosen to go home if they were that late to a musical, but James had spent weeks trying to score these tickets. This was their one shot to see Hamilton, and those of you who have seen Hamilton will appreciate this, so they were not throwing away their shot. So the couple went in, found their seats, then went back to the lobby to enjoy some refreshment, catch their breaths. At the bar, James found a friendly stranger and struck up a conversation with him. He asked, "My wife and I missed the first act. Could you please tell me how the play began?" The man replied, "Sure. Hamilton debuted in January of 2015. It was created by an actor named Lin-Manuel Miranda. You see, Miranda was vacationing in Mexico, and while he was reading a biography about Alexander Hamilton, he realized, wait, James interrupted. "I'm sorry, but that's not what I meant. I meant, how did the play start?" "Oh, right. My apologies. Well, the theater was built in 1907 by an architect named George Keister. The stage is a proscenium stage with an opening of about 38 feet 9 inches. The orchestra pit can hold up to, hold up. James interrupted again. "Look, that is interesting, but I really just want to know how the story began." "Oh, the story. Well, why didn't you say so?" Many of us have developed a bad habit. When we come to Genesis 1, we come asking when or how the stage was built. How long ago was it built? How long did it take? What are the specs? What material did the architect use? When was it finished? Now, to be fair, these questions are not unimportant or uninteresting. But for as important or interesting as such questions may be, they are not the questions the author of Genesis is interested in answering. Genesis 1 is not about how the stage was built. It is about how the story begins. And what if, just once, we listened to Genesis 1 in that way? What if we heard the creation story with fresh ears, setting aside our anachronistic concerns about stage logistics, and instead listening for what is being said about God, who He is, how He creates, how He feels about what He creates, and how we can be comforted in the present by what God did in the beginning? What if we stopped asking Genesis 1 to be a textbook and instead allowed it to be a story? Now, this is often the part where I would tell you to turn in your Bibles to Genesis 1 if you would like to keep up or consult with your screens, but for once, I would prefer it if you not did that. I would like for you to, if this is helpful, close your eyes and just listen. Pay attention to the way the text moves. Listen to the way God acts. Stop looking for an explanation and instead enjoy the story. This is Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said that the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the whole earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light and the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. But to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. This is the word of the Lord. From the very first two verses, God appears so beyond us and yet so near. Chapter 1, verse 1, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." To create something is to be separate from it, to be over it. God stands over creation as the one who is free from it, other than it. We call this freedom things like God's transcendence, or his holiness, words that are the closest we can get to capturing God's majesty, and yet words that still fall desperately short. And yet the Spirit of God, the text says, the Ruah Elohim, was hovering over the face of the waters. Do you hear something of a gentleness here? The holy Creator God fluttering over creation like a mother bird over her nest, present with it, caring for it, building it up and creating life in it. From the very beginning, we see a God who in his holiness nevertheless wills to make himself known. In theological terms, we call this God's transcendence and God's immanence. God who is distant and beyond, and yet God who is so very near. Creation is an act of this distant God creating something to be near to. And we don't know why God did this. Who can search the mind of God after all? But I think Karl Barth comes close when he writes that God creates because love wills to love. So God creates the heavens and the earth to love, but there's a problem. The earth was without form and void. The Hebrew phrase for this formlessness and void is tohu vabohu. It's hard to pinpoint what tohu vabohu means. This phrase occurs just 3 times in the Old Testament. We could describe it as chaos, maybe disorder, or lifelessness. There's biblical precedent for all of these nuances, and we don't need to caught up getting overly specific. What is clear is that the tohu vabohu stands as an obstacle preventing creation from being what it could be. It stands between creation's potentiality and its actuality. So the question the narrator suggests right out of the gate is, what's God going to do about it? In short, he will create. God takes what is formless and starts to give it form. He takes what is lifeless and not only gives it life, but gives it the capacity to multiply, to create more and more and more life. What we realize as Genesis 1 unfolds is that however formidable the tohu vabohu may seem, God sorts it out without struggle or conflict. Indeed, all God has to do is speak. Like a great king, God speaks and it is fulfilled. He decrees and the very cosmos obeys. As John Goldingay writes in his commentary of Genesis, creation denotes a sovereign act whereby God transforms disorder, jumble, and disarray into form, harmony, and peace. Such transformation is careful and organized. God does not improvise. He doesn't wait to cross bridges till he gets to them. Goldingay continues, quote, creation resembled the work of someone who knows he has a week's work to do, thinks through what he needs to do, makes a plan, and implements it. God makes this plan and dismantles the tohu vabohu with divine precision. Each day builds upon the other. But did you notice a certain parallel structure throughout? Day 1, God makes light. Day 4, God lights up the sky. Day 2, God separates the waters. Day 5, God fills the waters. Day 3, God makes land appear and made it produce growth. Day 6, God fills the land with creatures and humanity to enjoy and be provided for by it. A place for everything, and everything in its place. But the way Genesis narrates these things is not what we are used to. We want dates and times. Was it 6,000 years ago or 3 billion years ago? Did it happen in a moment or did it happen over time? We want the plan. But the text gives us poetry. Did you hear it? Did you hear the almost musical bounce to this passage? Each day features a complementary pair two things somewhat distinct and yet somewhat made for each other. And each day ends with the same refrain, and there was evening and there was morning. The story has an inner rhythm to it. Day, night, evening, morning, waters, waters, evening, morning, earth, sea, evening, morning, fruits, vegetables, evening, morning, sun, moon, evening, morning, sea creatures, birds, evening, morning, male, female, evening, morning, rest. On the seventh day, God rests. He Sabbaths from all the work that he had done. And we cheated this in the children's sermon, but it begs asking again, why does God rest? Why does God rest? Sarah is a creator. I told her this time, I said, for once my story won't be at your expense. She is a creator. While we were quarantining at my parents' house back in April of 2020, Sarah, as she's known to do, got bit by the DIY bug. And so she redesigned the guest room that we were staying in. And to my mom's credit, my mom thought, sure, sounds great. Her plan was to make the wall behind the headboard a green accent wall, and then hang floating nightstands with exposed shelves right above them. And she executed that plan with impressive attention to detail. She even learned how to do things I don't know how to do. She painted the trim, filled in the wall with an even coat. Here's where she's better than me now. She learned how to use a Kreg jig to create her nightstands, coated them with a neutral finish, measured where and how they needed to go, leveled them, and mounted them. Even did some wiring stuff to get the lamps to fit through the nightstand so it looked neat. And when she was finished, I've got the pictures. It looks wonderful. And after cleaning up the room, she, and of course Benji, just kind of sat there in it. Now, sure, she was tired. And so she was probably resting to catch her breath from what took a couple of days. But more than that, she was resting in what she had made. She created this. It was the work of her hands, and now that she was finished, it was time to take some time to enjoy it. That is why God rests. The problem of the tohu vabohu has been solved. God has formed something that he loves, that he delights in. He has created something very good. And what good is creating something good if you do not take time to enjoy it? I think when we hear God say it was very good, we assign that kind of an ethical category, that God meant it was morally good, which maybe that would be more in place in Genesis 2 than in Genesis 1. I think God just thought it looked good. This is great. This is gorgeous. And I think I'll take some time to enjoy it. From here, it is as though the camera begins panning out. And as the shot grows wider and we take in the image of God resting in the world that he had made, the narrator then summarizes. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. And that day the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. End scene. Do you see what is to be gained from hearing this passage afresh? This is how the story, which is indeed our story, begins, with the Creator God creating what he loves and fashioning that love into something ordered and filled with life. He is unmoved by the chaotic tohu vabohu. For however threatening it may be to us, it poses no threat to him. Reminding ourselves of the way the story begins helps us then to make sense out of or have hope in where we are in the story. This was certainly true of our fictitious couple, James and Sharon. You ask how the story began, so you know where you are in the story. It was certainly true of Israel. Israel's story across Scripture is riddled with tohu vabohu, with chaos and hardship with disorder, exile, and death. And it would be easy to jump in the middle of the story and think that this chaos was insurmountable. But the creation story reminded them that their God had made quick work out of the tohu vabohu before, and he could be trusted to do it again. As John Goldingay writes elsewhere, quote, when the creation story portrays God definitively bringing order out of unrelated pieces, this encourages people whose life world has fallen apart in the way that it had for Judah in the 6th century. God's project from the beginning involved bringing order, and it promises that disintegration will not have the last word, end quote. The same goes for you. I know some of you in your stories well enough to know that you are worn out. Your lives are filled with chaos and disorder. For some of you, it's the chaos of circumstances. Your candle is being burned on both ends, and quite frankly, you're running out of wax. Even people who are stretched too thin think you're stretched too thin. Though for others, it's internal disorder. Your racing mind makes the idea of having just a moment in time of peace or stillness seem like a distant paradise. Whatever it is, and it looks different for all of us, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're having to go through that. It's hard. And there's no shame in admitting it's hard. God sees your outer and inner chaos. He is not blind to it. You ask, well then, what's he going to do about it? And that's why it's important that we read Genesis 1 right. There we see that our God is a God who orders chaos. He loves what he has made, and by his Spirit he is present with it, fashioning it into something new, into something good. You are a part of what God has made. God made you. And all of the kind of biological questions that raises about how is it that God can make me and I can be made about biological processes aside, all of that notwithstanding, God made you. The psalmist of Psalm 139 says, "You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." God does not leave in chaos what he has made in fear and in wonder. We may have to endure seasons of tohu vabohu. Some of us already are. But in the beginning, we learn something that the tohu vabohu is powerless to stop. We learn that this is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let heaven ring. God reigns. Let earth be glad.